Gentlemen, welcome into the Birds of the Round Table. We are on the eve of the new league year. Legal tampering is well underway, and we've got all kinds of free agency moves to talk about. Welcome into the show. I am your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at Shane Haff NFL. Joined, as always, by the crew. First up, we've got David. Give him a follow on Twitter at PHL Eagle News. David, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great. Ready to see all of the comments. I've been waiting for this all day, just to see everyone's reactionary comments. So definitely put them in the chat.
All right. We'll do. Also joined by Ryan Reese. Give him a follow on Twitter at Philly Sports PSA. Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Certainly better than the rest of the Eagles world. As if you've been on any social media, the world's falling apart. But we're here to help the people. Don't worry.
All right. Man of the people, Ryan there. Also joined by Dives. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. Dives, how are you doing?
Woosah, guys. Woosah. We're going to get through this.
All right. Well, we are going to dive into it. We're going to talk through all of the Eagles' moves so far, or lack thereof. We'll go through guys that they have re-signed, guys they've traded, guys they've lost in free agency. And let's start with the first domino to fall. Actually, I don't remember chronologically how it happened now. Did the Saquon extension or the Zack Baun thing come first? I think it was Saquon, right?
Saquon.
Yeah. And if I recall correctly, we actually talked about that last Tuesday night a little bit. But Saquon Barkley signed to a 2-year extension that was erroneously reported as freeing up like $12 million in cap space. It actually didn't make a difference for the cap. What it essentially boiled down to is Saquon did not have guaranteed money in 2026, and now he does. And there's unguaranteed money in 27 and 28. So essentially rewarding a player who had a great year with some incentives, guaranteeing his salary for 2 years from now, while still retaining that parachute after the 2026 season, if it was needed. Dibes, did you want to throw up? Did you say you wanted to grade these as we go along?
There it is. There it is.
Okay. Well, you're the grade guy, so grade the Saquon extension.
You want me to go first?
Yes.
All right. I know a lot of people were like, but why, spend that much money as a luxury? I think the entire premise of the offseason, how he made it very clear, is culture. I mean, you look at the combine and that interview he had, culture is massive this offseason. And I think Saquon is, exhibit A. I mean, I guess 1B if you want to include Jalen Hurts in that. Saquon on the field, off the field, is kind of symbolic of what Howie Roseman envisions this roster looking like going forward. So for me, it's not the touchdowns. It's not all the explosive plays we saw from Saquon. It's the pass protection. It's the run blocking. It's all the little things. It's his faith. It's his family. It's the selflessness. All the times he ducked instead of hitting a home run or a touchdown for the betterment of the team. How many times did we see that time and time and time again? The record, for goodness sake. How do you not give this? I'll give it an A. It's not an S. There's only one S here. But I'll give this an A for the sake that this guy could go down as one of the best, not one of the best Eagles running backs of all time. There is concern about his injury history. I'm not going to deny that. But overall, if this is the identity, if 2025 is the identity of what to expect going forward, of what this team wants to be, great defense, a young defense, and a dominant running offense, I am all in.
All right, Ryan, any thoughts on the Saquon extension?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it was not necessarily a complete shock. Obviously, Howie and the Eagles, they reward players, when it's, makes sense. And yeah, I think I'm with Dibes here. I don't think this is necessarily an S, but yeah, I think this is A. It's smart. Again, it tells the league hey, you know what? You come here, you do your job, you do really well, and you could get a boatload of money. So, hopefully that, pays dividends down the line. But more importantly, clearly he was a difference maker in the locker room and for this team. And we saw it week in, week out.
All right. David, any thoughts on the Saquon extension that you want to chime in?
Yeah, I'd give it an A too. I think it's twofold. I think in addition to rewarding him for a great year, I also think in the world of football, guaranteed money reigns supreme. And by giving him that guaranteed money in 26, you avoid the situation that the Eagles are in right now with Dallas Goedert by having a guy on the roster who doesn't have guaranteed money left on their deal. And it just completely avoids that. And if they would have tried to do this a year later, I think everybody just saw free agency of how higher the prices are every single year in this thing. So what looks like a lot today is not going to look like that much next year. So I think they got ahead of it. I think they rewarded a player. I think it sends a message to the league, like Ryan said, that if you come here and you play well and you succeed, you're going to be rewarded with a larger paycheck.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It was a little surprising to me because it's pretty rare to see a guy sign a 3-year deal and then get an extension after that first season. That's pretty rare. But if anybody earned it, it's Saquon. And so he will count $6.6 million against the cap in 2025, $9.8 million in 2026. And then there is that out in his contract after that, which would leave the Eagles with $31 million in dead cap if they chose to do that. Otherwise, of course, they've got him under contract for 27 and 28. So, okay, so Saquon extension is A tier. Maybe we circle back to Zack Baun to put people in a good mood again later.
Right.
Let's talk about a few of the guys that have left in free agency. We'll start with the easy one. The Eagles released James Bradberry with a post June 1 designation. I mean, there's nothing really to say there. Like, we all knew that was coming, right? That was the most obvious move ever. I thought, to be honest, they should have got rid of him this year and taken some of that hit instead of trying to push it off. But maybe he's, a little bit of a coach in the locker room there, helping out some of the young guys. And you can't discount that. But James Bradberry gone via release. I would imagine that he's probably played his last snaps in the NFL, but anybody have any thoughts they want to throw out on the Bradberry release?
Should we grade these? I feel like let's just grade everything. Why not? We got the graphic.
Go for it. I agree with everything you said, but I do think he did bring a value to that cornerback room, especially when you had two rookies in there with Cooper and Quignon. I think he did make a difference. And I do think probably not next year, but in the future, you're going to see Coach James Bradberry at the NFL level.
Yeah. All right. So, Dibes, where would you slot in the Bradberry release?
I'll give it a solid S. just for the sole purpose. Just for the sole purpose that it gave us one of my favorite memories of the Super Bowl win. It was, I believe, a photo from Andrew DeCecco, who does an amazing job inside the Birds, and it's him celebrating in the locker room after doing absolutely nothing. But realistically, I'll give it, a B.
Yeah, it's a great move.
That's what I was thinking. It was expected. He had his injury last year, and listen, we don't know. We'll never truly know the impact that he did or did not have on those young corners. But all I do know is that Bradberry was here, and we have two of the best young corners in the game. So
we have a new Bradberry. We have a new Bradberry for 2025.
And he kept his mouth closed for 2 years. And that's not an easy thing to do. That's true. Solid B for bye. Appreciate it. But,
B for bye.
Oh, man. That's good.
If we were going off of the pass-fail, that he gets a complete. It was complete. We've all known this one was coming. So, okay, let's go to the other guy that the Eagles released, but then and then he signed with the Steelers, but then turns out the Eagles didn't release him, and now they're maybe going to try to trade him with the Steelers. I don't know what's going on with Darius Slay, but for the purposes of grading this, let's just say the Eagles let him walk, because that seems like that's what was going to happen. David, what are your thoughts on the Darius Slay situation?
I agree with everything you mentioned. I have no idea what to think, but if they really let him go and there is no compensation, I give it a C. I mean, I do think he could have contributed for one more year. That's all he wants to play. I don't think it's going to take some large commitment. We're about to discuss one of the reasons he didn't want to stay, and they're no longer on the team anymore. So I don't know, a C for me if they don't get him back. But I do think it was a pretty savvy move for everyone to think he was cut, goes and gets a deal, and then, hey, yeah, you can have him for a 6th or a 7th round draft pick. So if that ends up happening, I would bump that up to a B. But if they just lose him without any compensation, I don't know, probably a C. And they're not going to get a comp pick if he only signs a 1-year deal either.
Yeah. For me, I feel like you have to tie the Slay thing to Isaiah Rodgers as well, because I was pro letting Darius Slay go and signing Isaiah Rodgers. I didn't love letting both of these guys go. So like in a vacuum, I would be fine if you let Rodgers go and kept Slay. I would be fine if you let Slay go and you kept Rodgers. But losing both of them, I don't love. Isaiah Rodgers signs a 2-year, $15 million deal with Minnesota, $7.5 million per year. I would have matched that for Isaiah Rodgers. Like if I was, if it was me, I would have let Slay go. I would have matched the Rodgers deal, and I would have let Rodgers and Keely Ringo go at it. And you would expect Isaiah Rodgers to probably win that, but we're not just giving it to you. And, go compete and go win a job. And I'm disappointed that the Eagles let both of these guys get out of the building, because when you stack that up with also Chauncey Gardner-Johnson that we'll get to here in a little bit, it's a lot of turnover for a secondary. And I don't know what the plan is behind it, because, are the Eagles comfortable just tossing Keely Ringo out there outside? They weren't this year. He was way down the pecking order. You had Isaiah Rodgers ahead of him. You had Avonte Maddox ahead of him. Same thing with Sidney Brown at safety. Like Avonte Maddox came off the bench before Sidney Brown. So I find it hard to believe it's a faith in Sidney Brown move with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. But so I guess I don't know how to grade them individually, but the combined thing of losing Slay and losing Isaiah Rodgers, I would give it a D.
Oh,
I don't know if that's allowed.
That's definitely allowed.
Dives is the grade.
Yeah,
guy. Do we get to chain these guys together?
All you have to do is say Dives rules and do whatever you want, and throw a coach in there or something.
Yeah, something like that. Ryan, what are your thoughts on the Slay thing, and if you want to tie it into the Isaiah Rodgers thing?
No, I think you said it beautifully that it all does tie in together. Again, I think a lot of people, obviously we love Slay and maybe some people love and hate Slay, but overall, I think we were comfortable with having him come back in a CB2 role, to kind of still mentor the youngins, but to let him go, and then the supposed already replacement on the roster you let go, and again, I would love to say that it's because they have, so much faith in Keely Ringo, who's my boy and I absolutely love. But listen, I think I'm more of a realist, and I don't think that's the case. Again, I don't know what the hell they're doing with Slay. I could have sworn he was in Pittsburgh, and then I was like, wait a minute, now he's not. Now he's here. Now he's there. He's everywhere. So yeah, I give it a C just because, again, I think maybe this is overall a mishandling of the DBs. And again, you tie in now with the Chauncey news. You're losing 3, players that played significant minutes for you in the defensive backfield, just like you're losing 3 significant players on your, front 4. It's not a good look when you're losing back end and front end people left and right here. So something's got to give, and I'm not a fan right now. So I'll give it a C.
All right, Dibes, what are your thoughts on all of this?
I'm with you, Shane. This is a D. I don't like it one bit. I mean, you're taking a strength of the team, and now it's straight gutted. I agree, Cameron. I hope D-Slay returns on a better deal. We'll see if they can come to an agreement. Cornerback in this draft was like kind of on the back burner. It was definitely a possibility, like day one and day two, but now it's definitely a real possibility. I don't like the options available, like Asante Samuel Jr., Kendall Fuller. You go on. They don't really do much for me, and I took a lot of heat from saying this last night's show. Like, I'm not a big Keely Ringo guy on the perimeter. It's just what it is. And I guess my faith in Keely Ringo is a little higher than Sidney Brown for sure. But I give this a D. I don't know what the plan is at this point, and it seems like Howie's loading up on mid-round picks to have a lot of maneuverability and kind of get the guys he wants to fit this roster. But I agree with what everyone else said. You know, D-Slay was the ultimate mentor on this team. You're losing Brandon Graham, and your defense is about to get even younger with all these draft picks. So I don't like it. I thought Isaiah Rodgers leaving and another player leaving was the biggest shock. We haven't gotten to him yet, but I don't like it. I give it a D.
If I can make one more comment, since we brought in Rodgers. For one, Rodgers couldn't really wait for the Slay situation to resolve. That's why he pounced on what he got. So I don't know if the Eagles could have matched it or not, because they were still deliberating with Slay. So they didn't really have an opportunity to really make a fair offer to him in those situations. And throughout the season, to be fair to Slay, anytime he left the field and Rodgers came in, every week we did this show, we talked about how there was a slight drop off going from Slay to Rodgers, if we're being honest. So I think they prioritized Slay for the right reasons. For another year, I do think he was the better choice. And as far as losing 3 of your defensive backs, they just did that last year. Quinyon Mitchell over James Bradberry, Cooper DeJean over Avonte Maddox, and CJ and GJ over Kevin Byard. So, yeah, it was a lot of turnover, but that defense had 7 players different from 2023 and 2024, and they became the most dominant defense in the league, replacing 7 of their 11 starters. So that doesn't really concern me either. I trust Fangio. I think he's the defensive MVP.
One thing I will say is that James Bradberry and Avonte Maddox were awful, and Kevin Byard was like average-ish to below average.
It was pretty awful too.
Slay was good, and Isaiah Rodgers was like he's a playable starter, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson we'll get to in a minute, and people won't like what I say about him because they've never liked what I've said about him. But
I still think Slay's in play here. I don't think he's gone.
Yeah, that's the thing with Slay. We don't know for sure. Maybe we'll have a whole different take on that by the time we get there. So we've talked around it all. We can get into the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson thing too.
Can we get some comments real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Let's throw some comments. Do you guys feel like the Eagles could look at a guy like Andrew Makuba now over guys like Emanwari or Starks? Emanwari and Starks. I have top 20 guys. Andrew Makuba could be available there. Day 2. David, any thoughts?
Yeah, I love him. He's been my favorite fit at safety the whole offseason. I love that dude for a bunch of reasons. Because of the cost, you could probably get him for a third, or the late 2 at 64. When you factor in cost, fit, I think he's an awesome fit for the Eagles. I love that dude.
Yeah. No, I like him too.
Sure. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say I was a fan of him when he was at Clemson, heading over to Texas. Yeah, I think, again, if we're not going to, go after any of the top guys, I think he's a nice, day 2, whether it be second or third round, I'd be all right with it.
John says if Emanwari is sitting there at 32, Howie would be fumbling the bag hard not to jump on it. That's where I'm at, John. 100%. But then again, this is Howie drafting a safety in the first round. I guess it's like technically
He traded the pick for
He's
somebody
gonna-
desperate.
Probably would.
But Eman Worry is one of my favorite players in this draft, and if he's sitting there, oh my God,
You're gonna cry on air.
Watch us during our draft show because the tears will be flowing. The Tito's and the tears both will be flowing. Good call. I think he can play. Xavier Watt is a baller, major play maker, ball hawk there. Xavier Watt could be a day 2 guy. We have a comment: Mason Taylor or Harold Fannin Jr. Ryan.
Mason Taylor.
Listen, I don't care what anybody says. I'm still going Fannin, baby. I'm sorry.
It's definitely Mason Taylor.
Yeah, I'm going Mason.
Agrees. Mason Taylor. You're taking Philly out of this team without Slay and CJ, GJ. Letting these guys go didn't work so well last time. We went to the Super Bowl. Cameron says Ringo's younger than Quinyon. If he would have stayed in college, he would have. What would his draft stock be this season? Interesting. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd still think it would have to be. I mean, listen,
It'd be highly dependent on how he played.
Well, obviously, yes, but you got to remember though, before his senior year or his last year, I should say, he was one of the top cornerback prospects. He didn't have a great year, and he fell hard. That's why we were able to get him so late. But he was a highly touted prospect. So I wouldn't imagine that, again, it's hard to say because he's so darn young. I think being in college, I think he'd be a top, first round, second round at the worst.
Wasn't he a 4th round pick by the Eagles?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I freaked out in the second round.
First rounder, right?
Wait, didn't you have him like really high?
Yeah, he was like 24 on my big board. I still have a lot of faith in Ringo.
All right.
It has been shaken a little bit by the fact they haven't seemed to want to put him on the field, but I still really like Ringo. He hasn't given me a reason on film to move off of what I thought of him in the draft. Maybe he starts this year and he gives me those reasons, but I still have a lot of faith in him. I had a first round grade on him. I freaked out when he was there in the second round and the Eagles didn't take him. I freaked out in the third round when he was there and the Eagles didn't take him. And when they traded up in the 4th round and he was still there, I was like, if this isn't for Ringo, and then it was, and we were all happy. So, I like Ringo a lot. Sidebar. What if we just get the band back together? Rasul Douglas is still in free agency. Marcus, low key, I think Rasul Douglas is a good fit here, by the way. But Marcus Epps is in free agency.
Oh my God, Marcus Epps.
Can we also decide Miles Sanders as well?
Bring Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell, bring them all back. No,
wow, let's not go crazy.
Kenny Gainwell or Miles Sanders for running back 2.
Sanders.
Oh my
God. Let me catch up before we get into CJ.
Hold on. I need an answer to that from you and David too.
Which part?
Kenny Gainwell or Miles Sanders running back 2? Who would you rather have?
I think you already know my answer.
Hey, be a man and say it.
It's 1,000% Kenny Gainwell. I think he would be pretty cheap.
I'm with you.
David?
What about you, David?
Kenny G.
Yeah. Okay. Just making sure we were all except for just making sure everybody that has
Miles Sanders
the
costs more than Kenny Gainwell at this point. Come on.
Okay. It's kind of sad how things have gone.
It really has, right?
CJ coverage. Let me catch up and then we'll get to CJ. Mark says F for CJ. CJ was awesome here. We may never replace his heart, but that dog mentality can be replaced. Does Malachi Starks fall to 32? That would be unbelievable.
Awesome. I love it.
Abby says, love Makuba or the Bama kid. If you can get Watt Starks. Anybody have news on Dallas Goedert? What are your guys' quick thoughts on Dallas Goedert? He could potentially save $16 million over the next few years if he's traded, right? So that's kind of the trend here. Howie loading up for these extensions with Jalen Carter and Cam Jurgens and Nolan Smith, Ryan.
So listen, I got that. But I love the people that, like, I don't know, get too invested in the money aspect of things. Listen, it's not my money. How he does things to this cap that other GMs just don't even know about. And I trust him on that aspect. Whether or not, whatever, you trust him in any other aspect of his job. I trust him on contracts, wiggle room, if you will. So I'm not, you tell me, oh, you can save this much money. I don't care. What I care about is who's going to play freaking tight end. And if your answer is Grant Calcaterra, you deserve to be slapped in the face.
With Harold Fannin Jr.
Listen.
They're the same player.
Listen. Oh my God. Oh. Lord, give me strength. Oh. I'm not going to comment on that. I'm going to stick to my point. Grant Calcaterra cannot be your tight end one. I'm sorry. He is not
Copy paste.
that capable in the blocking game. He is in the receiving game. He is not good at either one of those to be a number one tight end. In fact, I don't want him to be the number two tight end personally, but that's neither here nor there. If there is no other plan, if your plan is to draft somebody, I still don't like it. I still would rather have Dallas here another year, and then you can go ahead and trade him. But trading him now at this point, coming off of the Super Bowl, where you're already losing a lot of defensive players here, and you're going to have to make sure you're hitting on these defensive players. You don't need to add anything more to the checklist over on the offensive side of the ball in order to recoup. So I don't like it. I understand the savings. I understand all that, and I understand how he operates. For me, it's a next year kind of thing, not a this year thing.
Yep. We have a comment here from T. Grant. Anyone thinks Braden Swinson will be a second-round pick? I think Braden Swinson is one of the most underrated players in this draft.
100%.
He's an edge rusher, great run defender, very good athlete. I don't think people talk enough about Braden Swinson. I literally have a video in the works, and he's top of the list. It's a underrated prospect video, and Braden Swinson's at the top of the list, man. He's awesome.
Perfect fit for the Eagles, too.
Yeah, that's a really great name. Great comment there. Makuba going to have to work on those missed tackles, but I like him. Howie disappointed me today.
I want to say something about the Goedert thing in the cap.
Go.
Everybody's acting like the Eagles are in like dire straits cap-wise, and that's simply not the case. And I think we've already proved that most people don't understand how the cap works. See the discussions about how Saquon Barkley's extension affected the cap, and people coming at me for explaining it. But the Eagles aren't in some dire straits. They're like 20th in cap space right now. They're like 19th or 18th next season. And like, they're not the Saints. They're not the Chiefs that are in ridiculous cap straits. And people are going to say, well, yeah, but the Jalen Carter is going to make $40 million a year or whatever. Who cares? Like, Saquon Barkley signed a deal at $13 million a year, and he hit the cap for $3 million in his first year. And that was a running back. Like, you think Howie Roseman's not going to sign Jalen Carter to a 4-year deal with 8 void years and guarantee a crap ton of money and spread that out? Like, Jalen Carter could sign a $40 million extension, and we're only going into his third year. So that extension wouldn't even kick in until 2027 when he would hit the cap for like $8 million. And so the Eagles are not in this dire cap strait that people are thinking they're in by these moves. They're simply, we're going to get into the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson thing. That was not a money move. That wasn't a football or a finance move, and we'll talk about that. But that's where the Dallas Goedert thing doesn't make sense to me. Like, yeah, you could get rid of Goedert and it saves you like $15-ish million versus playing it out this year and then taking the dead hit. But when you look at how valuable he is to the team, I had a tweet that I put out before the playoffs, and Dallas Goedert I'll just read it. Dallas Goedert averaged 2.2 yards per route from 11 personnel this season, the second most among qualifying tight ends. The Eagles also averaged 6.3 yards per carry with Dallas Goedert on the field, compared to 4.9 without him. Like, Dallas Goedert is so valuable to this offense, in my opinion. I think it would be certifiably insane to trade Dallas Goedert for a 4th-round pick or something. Like, let's not forget, 2 weeks ago, everybody was convincing themselves the Eagles should trade multiple first-round picks for Myles Garrett. And cap wasn't a problem then, but now all of a sudden cap's a problem. Like, people don't understand the cap. They don't understand what they're looking at. And that's fine. Like, you don't have to dig into all of it. Just know that money is not the primary motivating factor on a lot of these deals that are being done. The Eagles are making decisions, and that, you know, they're being prudent. You're not just going to go light money on fire. But that's where I don't understand the Goedert thing, and I won't understand the Goedert thing if they do decide to move on from him. I do understand the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson thing, and maybe that's a good place to get into it, but I'll throw it back around real quick before we do and ask if anybody wants to comment on the cap or Goedert any further.
For the record, I'm all in on bringing him back.
I agree with everything.
Yes, bring him back.
Yeah, I'm bringing him back too.
At least for a year. But I love this comment from Benjamin, longtime Eagles fan, real disappointed and dissatisfied in today's moves with our defense. Let's get into CJ Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah, and that's fair. Like, it's fair to be disappointed because it feels like every other team is getting better. And the Eagles haven't signed a soul in free agency. They've just lost guys. But you also need to remember, I would rather sign nobody than sign Dan Moore to $21 million a year, or apparently sign Bryce Huff to $17 million a year. So all that glitters is not gold when it comes to free agency. So let's get into Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. The Eagles trade Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to the Houston Texans for a pick swap. I think it was a 6th to a 5th.
Yep.
And they get Kenyon Green out of the deal, who was a first-round pick in the 2022 draft. A guy, I think he was 15th on my big board in that draft. So I had a first-round grade on him. He was pretty widely thought of as a first-round guy, and he's been awful in 2022. Injured and missed 2023, awful in 2024. And this wasn't, in my opinion, and I watched 2 games of Kenyon Green. He's terrible. In my opinion, this wasn't like selling Chauncey Gardner-Johnson high. This wasn't a financially motivated. The only way this move makes sense, this isn't a football move. This is a personality move. This is we want Chauncey Gardner-Johnson out of the building, and honestly, we might have cut him. So we just took what we could get. I don't know if my read is on that is correct, but that's my read on it, that this was we're getting Chauncey Gardner-Johnson out of the building, and what we get back really doesn't matter.
Yeah, who wants to go first?
David hasn't talked in a while.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I do think there was personality problems. I do think the money that they saved 2 years down the road is a small factor. I think having depth at OL played a little factor. I do not think he's your starting right guard. I don't think anything like that. I think he is a depth piece, but I think there were a lot of issues that go on there, and who knows, maybe one of them is bringing back Slay. Maybe that was a contingency. None of us are ever going to know that because that's serious interpersonal problems there. I did see them sitting beside each other this weekend at a card show, though, which was rather strange. I did not see them engage in conversation, but they were sitting right next to one another. But yeah, I think it was some personality. I do think it was a little bit of money. I think it was a little bit of OL depth. I think that they thought they could bring him back after what they went through before and thought he maybe would be a little bit different, but that's just not how things are going to play out. I wish him well. I think he was a great player while he was here. He does a lot of things that a lot of people can't do. I don't think he's going to be hard to replicate in some ways. I think he gets a lot of credit on the field that if you watch the film later, you might not be as impressed as you are on game days, because he does have some flashy plays with turnovers, interceptions, etc., which show up big in highlights, but on a full body of work 60 snaps in a game, you will see things a lot differently. So I do think he'll be able to be replaced.
Yeah, I mean, at the midpoint of the season, I was on film review shows with Johnny, and we were legitimately talking about if the Eagles should just bench him. That's how bad he was at the start of the season. So people notice the flash plays when he triggers downhill and stuffs a guy on 4th and 1. They notice the flash play when he steals Quinyon Mitchell's first career interception. And he makes those splash plays, and they don't necessarily notice the plays where he blows coverages or gives up the most touchdowns of any safety. Like, I think people have consistently overrated Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in 2022. I think he led the NFL in interceptions, or at least from the safety position. And I remember talking about together. Okay, and I remember talking about, like, literally not one of those was a good play that he made. It was a result of someone else getting pressure and the ball sailing to him. And I'm like, credit him, he caught it. And there was a couple he laid out and caught, but he wasn't like jumping routes. And, you know, he was consistently picked on in the red zone. So, you know, anytime you're going to lose a starter, that's tough, but he's not some top 10 safety in the league like Eagles fans think that he is. And people have hated me saying that since 2022, but he's just not. He brings some attitude to the defense, and I think the attitude probably wore thin with Vic Fangio, and he's a no-nonsense guy, and when you put together a season like Vic did, you're going to have a lot of sway, and I think this probably comes down to Vic wanted him gone, so he's gone.
I think one of the things the Super Bowl season convinced all of us is not just in Howie Roseman we trust, but in Vic Fangio we trust. And for better or worse, he clearly believes Sidney Brown has some juice. But I agree with what everyone says. CJ Gardner-Johnson had his ups and downs that we don't talk about the downs in 2024. He was out of position many times, missed tackles many times. Yeah, he brought some swag, and who knows what happened behind the scenes. But I do think there's also a contractual component. He sees everyone in-house getting more money, and I feel like he went to Howie and was like, I want more money. And he said no. But I think this move is not just about the belief in Sidney Brown, but the big picture. Howie is clearly setting up this team for those extensions, which can start in January for Jalen Carter, who should make $40 million a year. Nolan Smith, you're probably talking $20 million a year. Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell in 2 to 3 years. Cam Jurgens, we're talking market resetting players that is not that far down the road. And when you talk about every dollar matters and you can roll over cap, I think that's exactly what Howie was talking about being patient and getting the right guys in. So for me, I think this is a B move. And I know a lot of people are upset about this. You got to take the emotion out of it. For me, you shed the fat right now so you don't put yourselves behind the 8 ball down the road. And for a lot of Eagles fans, I know it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's the right pill for better or worse. And I agree, there better be a plan, but they have 8 draft picks. Howie's been on the heater, and they earned the benefit of the doubt.
The big thing that I keep seeing people talk about is the mentality that he brings. But Sidney Brown's the same type of player. Sidney Brown loves to come downhill and hit. He's bad in coverage. Like, Sidney Brown is he's a bad tackler that loves to hit people hard. Like, go watch the hit he put on Terry McLaurin flying downhill. And so, you know, I think the mentality thing is a little bit overblown. And I saw a few comments here about how trashing guys on the way out the door. I'm not trashing him. He's an average-ish safety in the NFL, and I've pretty consistently said that over multiple years. So you can go.
CJ Gardner-Johnson was one of the most hated players, like a quarter of the way into the season. And I remember talking about it on the show about how like frustrating he was, and he turned it around and he made a lot of big plays. But I do agree. I think
he's a good player, but he's not Brian Dawkins. I mean, let's
No, you're absolutely. I mean, you guys have certainly said it best. But yeah, listen, I get it from the general fans' perspective. Is you have a guy here that when he was here, we make to Super Bowls. When he's not here, we fall apart. And we see what he does for the energy out there on the field. And yeah, listen, he does make some great plays. He does make some flashy plays. And I think in our system, he's kind of allowed to kind of be that, wanderer where he can kind of go where he needs to be and plays that way. But sometimes that bites him in the ass. And yeah, he's not the greatest tackler in the world. But they obviously feel some kind of way about Sidney Brown. I think we've all said here once or twice here that I think we're a little bit maybe disappointed in Brown or hoping that he'd be further along. But obviously that injury certainly set him back, and hopefully now that he's a year removed from that injury, he'll really start to ascend. And yeah, they obviously have to make tough choices sometimes, and you can't all have all pros at every position here. And as much as I did enjoy Chauncey Gardner, I wouldn't doubt that this comes down to, hey, here's a guy who's maybe talks a lot and maybe doesn't get along with the defensive coordinator all that much or whatever. And it was kind of an easy decision, but yeah, it stings a bit. So I'll put it as a C, just because I know there's a lot more to it than just what you see on the field. And it hurts for people, and I understand that. So I'm with you, but again, I think this is one of those tough scenarios where you're eventually going to have to take a step back in a position so that you can kind of get everybody else in line. So
a comment here that Sidney Brown,
if I can add one thing to that.
Oh, go ahead.
I said, if I can add one thing to that, as like Shane said, this helped the cap a little bit, but the Eagles are not in cap hell. This was not simply just for money. This was someone they had under contract for 2 more years. And I think Vic Fangio has earned the right that if he wants Sidney Brown, if that's really the guy he wants to start, you let him do it. He has full autonomy on the defense. If that's his guy and that's who he wants, that's who you roll with. He's earned the right to make those decisions.
Sure.
Yeah. Comment here, Sidney Brown, believe it or not, misses more tackles than CJ. Believe it or not, last year when Sidney Brown played, he had an 11% missed tackle rate. And in his 6-year career, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson has never had below a 14.5% missed tackle rate. So that's actually not true.
Yeah.
It's not actually that close.
Oh.
But
where are we putting him? What grade? I want to be.
It's a C for me, but
it's a C for me too.
As a football move, it's an F, but as all things encompassing, and I think there was probably some issues behind closed doors, it's a B or a C for me. So just
we'll
to get somewhere in the middle there.
Go C. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're gonna have to pick this up because
this is gonna.
We got to go record a running back show after this, but we'll be quick here on these next few because they're not super meaningful. The Eagles trade Kenny Pickett for Dorian Thompson Robinson. Kenny Pickett was going into the final year of a deal. Dorian Thompson Robinson makes $1 million instead of $2 million and has 2 years left. I think this is great for the Eagles because Tanner McKee is a better quarterback than Kenny Pickett anyways, so it clears the way for him to be QB2, and Kenny Pickett can go try to start in Cleveland and get revenge on the Steelers twice a year. So this is an A move for me.
I love it.
And you get an extra year of eligibility, like you said.
And they have a Jalen Hurts clone to develop. DTR's tape in Cleveland is terrible, but so is every quarterback that goes there. That's the place where quarterbacks die. So for me, I'm going A.
All right, Ryan, you're the dissenter here. You're shaking your head. Talk to me.
Man, the Kenny Pickett hate on this program is diabolical. Look at you already put him in A.
I'm waiting for you, bro.
Oh, I forgot there was an S tier.
God. Come on. Listen, I think Kenny Pickett was horrendously underrated. I think people just saw, the small hands and couldn't get around it. I thought for a backup quarterback, I thought he was fantastic. Everybody wants to, again, I won't say it, for Tanner McKee. And there was a reason why he was backup to Kenny Pickett. So I'm going to miss Kenny Pickett. Oh, my, come on. You are the worst. You are the worst.
By the way, Ryan's slightly biased. Slightly.
I'm slightly biased. I'm a Pitt fan.
Remember that time that the ball threw Kenny Pickett?
Hey, listen, he must have had one of those weighted balls. I got it. Listen, I think this is this was a move we all knew it was coming. And I do actually like TTR. I think, again, coming out, I was a big fan. Obviously, Cleveland does some weird things to quarterbacks. And, listen, everybody gets their Tanner McKee time. So enjoy it. Hopefully he never sees a snap.
All right.
I'll put it B so you guys can do whatever you want. I don't freaking
All right, let's run through two guys that we all knew the Eagles weren't keeping. It's Josh Sweat and Milton Williams. Josh Sweat gets a 4-year deal worth $19.1 a year with Arizona. Milton Williams gets 4 years, $26 million a year at New England. Hey, shout out to both of those guys. Josh Sweat signs, a 1-year deal to come back, and I wouldn't say he balls out, but he balled out in the Super Bowl and gets a big contract. And Milton Williams, I would not want to be the team that paid that for Milton Williams, but you shout out to him for going and getting paid, and even more so for going to the AFC so we can all root for him all the time. So especially to the Patriots, a team that can't sniff the playoffs, so we don't even have to worry about them in a Super Bowl. Any thoughts on those guys departing in free agency?
Both.
Yeah, I heard Milt's giving Jalen Carter about 20 of that money, 20 mil. So.
As he should. Yeah, listen, this was completely expected. We knew we weren't matching any offer that they were going to be getting out on the free agent market. It sucks, cost of business. But yeah, I think this is kind of whatever you want to call it, B, C. It's a nothing to me, just because it was so expected.
Yeah, we knew it in September.
Yeah,
it just depends on how you want to do your grading scale, I guess, because I'd say it's S tier to not pay Milton Williams $26 million, but it's C because it was what we expected. I don't know how you want to do it. I'm very glad the Eagles didn't pay either one of those contracts.
Agreed.
So let's talk. The last guy the Eagles lost was Oren Burks, 2 years, $2.5 million a year to Cincinnati. This is one I would have paid. I think it would have made sense to bring him back, especially with Nakobe Dean likely missing the start of next year at least. And so you're looking at maybe Jeremiah Trotter Jr. being the slotted in starter now. Maybe they go do something in the draft. I don't know. Obviously, bringing Zack Baun back covers up a lot for you in the middle of the field. But I thought Oren Burks played well down the stretch. I thought he was a huge part of special teams, and I would have paid him $2.5 million. And I would imagine that the Eagles couldn't guarantee he would start, and Cincinnati could, and that's why he made the decision. Because I can't imagine the Eagles not matching this.
Yeah,
I hate this. This is an E for me. I hate it so much. Like the way he showed up in the NFC Championship game in the Super Bowl. I don't think we talk about it enough. He was an unsung hero. He was a playmaker when they really needed it, because Nakobe Dean was fantastic all year. This is an E. This is the one move that really pissed me off.
Yeah, I agree. But I think it came down to exactly that. The Eagles would have matched this. It's just they couldn't guarantee him to start. He gets a shot in Cincinnati. That's great for him. So what can you do? That's just one of those costs of the business. But I agree. He would have been a perfect fit. But if you want to play every day, he had to take the team in Cincinnati. So, and he still has a shot to play for a really good team. So,
and if he turns out to be really good, he can do what every other good Bengals defensive player does, and that's go sign somewhere else in free agency in 2 years because they never pay anybody. So,
and if the Eagles defense sucks this year, we'll just sign CJ back again in 26 and go to another Super Bowl. It's just every other year thing. So,
yeah, there you go. All right. Well, the last one is the Zack Baun contract. This is the only real move of note that the Eagles made concerning free agency. This is the one guy they brought back, and we don't have details on the contract structure yet, at least that I've seen, but it is 3 years, $51 million, which is $17 million average annual value. I don't even know if we need to talk about it. Dibes already has it in S tier. This was literally when Nakobe Dean went down, Zack Baun became a bring back at all costs guy, and the Eagles got it done. And so this is out of the big four. This is the one you had to bring back. And, if it costs you all three of the other guys and Slay in the process, I still think it's worth it.
So excited.
Agreed.
Well deserved. The leader of the defense right there with Jalen Carter up the middle. What more can you say? Going after the quarterback, tackling, playmaking, coverage. We haven't had a true complete linebacker like this guy in forever. And just major shout out to Howie getting this done. This was the move all off season. And to be fair, he's probably going to be outside the top 5 paid linebackers in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on the Zack Baun contract before we get out of here?
No, sir.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. Our initial reactions to the Eagles' moves or lack thereof in free agency. Obviously, free agency will continue to unfold. I do not expect the Eagles to sign anybody to any contract that would cancel out a comp pick. So you're looking at very small deals or signing guys after the draft at this point. If they were in on guys, obviously they can bring back their own guys. They could bring back Becton. They could bring back Slay. They could sign guys that are cut. So there's still guys they could be in play for, but in terms of the big guys that just walked in free agency, I don't think you're going to see any moves over the next week. But if they do, we'll be here to break it down next Tuesday night. And if not, we'll break down something else. So, thank you guys for joining in here. We'll throw it around the horn for final thoughts, and then we will get out of here and go record a running back show. But David, final thoughts, man. The floor is yours.
I still think they'll be very competitive for Becton. So I think most of the moves you see that Howie is willing to do and shuffle around is all on the defense. It's never on the offense. That's why Goedert would surprise me. Team predicated in the game, it'd be shocking to see him leave. I think they've had the right approach. I think they prioritize the right players. And you follow everything I do at PHL, Eagle News, Philly Sports Network. I have a piece coming out tomorrow about how the Eagles are prudent to be patient throughout this period. So check that out. And thanks everybody for watching and commenting. Great show.
All right. Ryan, I'll throw it to you next. We do have a comment here that I don't know if it's true that says Kenny Gainwell is a Steeler and they need your reaction. I'm going to verify that while you talk about it.
Well, listen, if that's true, I got to admit, I'm not happy. I wanted him as far away from Pennsylvania as I could. And for him to stay in the state is almost insulting. So I'm going to have a personal conversation with Kenny G.
Schultz is reporting that Jordan Schultz.
Get the hell out my state. Listen, I do want to say in all seriousness, please make sure you guys are following all the other guys here. Shane just loves fighting with people on Twitter. Great content.
It's been a pattern now.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Shane just hates the people. What can I say? No, I'm kidding. Obviously.
Or beat writers.
Yeah, or shitty beat writers. But, anyway, I will say this. I know there's been a lot of negativity over the last 2 days on the legal tampering period. And obviously everything becomes officially official tomorrow. I have seen it. I know everybody here has seen it where, listen, maybe things start out a little slow. You don't truly see the big picture. And eventually, things come to fruition and the team's all right. But I will say this. Everybody is absolutely entitled to their opinion. And what I've been seeing a lot lately, and other social media people, and even people on the radio and prominent people in Philadelphia, that are basically yelling and screaming at fans for having that reaction, and I don't like that. I don't like that one bit. So I don't know where you get off telling people how to feel. So cut that stuff out before I have to get involved. Honestly, don't do it. People are allowed to feel however they want to. Let them do it. It's not your place. It never has been, and it never will be. That's all I'll say.
All right. Good stuff there, Ryan. The only exception is you're not allowed to feel certain ways about Harold Fanning Jr. That's over the line. So. No, good stuff.
Dives. In on Fanning. I can't help.
Dives, what about you, man?
Check out Party on Broad, another Eagles channel. I'll put out daily shorts on the Birds. Put out one on my thoughts on CJ Gardner-Johnson and why it was the right move. Probably get a lot of hate on that, but anyway, we are going live in just a few minutes about a position group that rivals the edge class and the defensive tackle class. It is the running backs. It is insanely deep. So if you love the NFL draft and you're a draft sicko like us, join us. It's a really fun group, and I can't wait to gush about it. So join us just momentarily. We'll go live.
All right. Well, that is going to do it here on this episode of Birds of the Round Table. My final thought, keep an eye on Mekhi Becton, because the longer he doesn't sign, I would think the more likely he's back in Philadelphia. The guard market was huge, but he didn't get one of those huge contracts. So I could see a scenario where he comes back. But keep an eye on that. Keep the faith in Howie, all those guys. I mean, the Eagles roster is still in a really good place. And I know it's frustrating to watch other teams seemingly improve and feel like your team's just getting worse. Just be patient. And Howie told us all that before free agency even opened. But that is going to do it for this episode. Make sure you are following these guys on Twitter. David is at PHL Eagle News. Ryan is at Philly Sports PSA. Dibes is at Mr. Crockpot. I am at Shane Half NFL, and we will catch you guys next week. Go Birds.